All right, so here we go. We are now concluding 2024 and going into 2025. But first, let's take a look at the UFC that has gone on from 2024 all the way through the end of December till this year. Now, we may catch every single card, we may not. Now, certainly, we are definitely going to catch all of the pay per views in UFC. I don't know about the whole entire fight night, but let's go through with it, okay? Let's start it off from the very beginning. 2024 in the UFC. What do we have here? So, a couple of things to really remember about this year's 2024, okay? Let's see here. Okay. Class action lawsuit was one of the most important news that we could sort of look at here, right? August 9th, 2023, U.S. District Judge Richard Boulware granted a class action status to more than 1,200 fighters, former UFC fighters who competed between December 2010 and 17. So that was a big deal during this time of the year. Drug-free Sports International Partnership. Obviously, USADA was causing a lot of problems for fighters in terms of creating a lot of different loopholes, creating a lot of difficulties, and also just borderline harassment. As you know, the UFC was also acquired by TKO right around the same entire year. But at the same time, it was also the same year that Vince McMahon had to be taken out of the equation. The same year that P. Diddy had to be taken out of the equation, maybe even Jay-Z, maybe even all these other people that were just running roughshod all throughout these years in terms of industry power, and now finally having to face accountability of some degree. And the UFC was now a part of this. Earlier February last year, they opened Mexico City. That was very big. Also, something that I've covered briefly in this channel, the acquisition by Silver Lake Private Equity, and this was around April 2nd, 2024, announced by TKO Endeavor, privately taken 100% by its largest investor, which is Silver Lake. 3 years after Endeavor had a 3-year run as a public company where Endeavor purchased the UFC for over $4 billion. Now, with the UFC partnering up with the WWE and TKO, we're talking about $10 billion now, where their whole entire net worth is at. The new gloves was also something that was introduced to the UFC, only for the gloves to be changed during the John Jones fight with Stipe, which is ironic and, by the way, very suspicious. New MMA rules was in tact. By the way, other things that a lot of this favored John Jones in a strange way, right? The 6-12 elbow was favored for John Jones. The gloves were favored for John Jones. And again, I'm not the type to really create this into this situation where, hey, you know what? John Jones had something to do with this. I'm not one of those people that believe that at all. I don't believe that for 1 second. Because I know that the UFC does not care whether they accommodate for John Jones or whether they accommodate for the next guy. They are going to operate in the same particular matter, whether it is John Jones or whether it is anybody else. At least I would like to believe that. At least I would like to believe that there is a fair competitive architecture within the UFC. TKO Group Holdings acquires new assets from Endeavor. Cannabis removed from prohibited list, just to name a few of all the things that have happened in this year. So let's take a look at the awards for UFC.com, right? Alex Pereira, #1 fighter of the year. Number 2 comes in Ilya Tapora, Carlos Pratt. How about this? Wins the newcomer award. Knockouts, Holloway, obviously with Gaethje. You can't forget that. That was a serious knockout right there. Ilya Tapora defeating Max Holloway. That was a serious fight. Knockouts. Alex Pereira defeating Khalil Roundtree. Diego Lopez is number 4 fighter of this year. Okay, that's interesting. Merab Dvalishvili obviously won against Sean O'Malley at the UFC's Noche, now taking on Omar next month in Los Angeles. Renato Moicano was a big part of it. Bilal Muhammad, his win against Leon Edwards this year, that was very big. Slamming him on the head. Right? You remember that? Man, slamming him on the head. How about this? And then the releases of this year, you had AJ Dobson, Abu Azaitar, Abu Bakr Nurmagomedov, part of Team Nurmagomedov, Albert Durev, Alexander Gustafsson. This year was released. Alexander Munoz was released this year. Alexander Romanov, that's pretty interesting and crazy. Anton Turklov, that guy was pretty interesting. He got released. Blake Bider got released. Brendan Murat, Brian Kelleher, that's quite interesting how he got released. But hey, at some point, it is what it is. Brianna Fortino, Brian Barberena got released. Kai Machado, Carla Esparza, okay, she retired. Carlos Candelero, Carapampos, Jurio, Casey Kenny, Christoph Giagos, Corey McKenna got released. That's interesting. How about Cynthia Cavallo? So this is a tough business, right? Because you got to remember Cynthia Cavallo was sort of a star, right? Team Alpha Male person that fights out of here in Sacramento. Da Woon Jung, Daniel Lacerda, Damon Jackson, Daniel Pineda, Daniel Wolf, Danny Henry. The list goes on. Jack Shore got released. Jamie Pickett, Jared Gordon got released. That's interesting. I mean, considering that Jared Gordon gave Paddy Pimblett a hard fight. Muhammad Makayev was also released. How about Mahmoud Murderov? That guy was sponsored by Mayweather, and Mayweather claimed that he was the best MMA fighter ever, but anything that Floyd does, obviously he's going to claim is the best. Mark Diakase has been released. Mike Grundy, Ricky Glenn, Sergey Morzov, Stephanie Egger, TJ Brown, Tyson Pedro. Tyson Pedro, okay, he retired. Tyson Pedro retired. As a matter of fact, I had a video on that particular matter. I had a video on that matter. It was also with Canelo, because obviously I was talking about the comparison of, let's say, Canelo retiring as opposed to Tyson Pedro. So the debutante fighters of this year, obviously Carlos Pratt stands out the most because most of these guys don't even have a Wikipedia page. John Silva, Jonata Deans, Kayla Harrison. Let's not forget she made her debut this year. Michael Venom Page made his debut this year. Rainier De Ritter, ONE FC double champion, makes his debut this year. And then these were the suspended fighters that got caught for anti-doping. Walt Harris came to mind. He's eligible to fight again in 2027. Wow. Okay, those are some serious. Yes. How about Khalil Roundtree? He got cleared. Okay, when did he get cleared? It was on July. Okay, so Bruno Silva, Armin Sarukian, $25,000 fine. Additionally, it issues an anti-bullying public service announcement approved by the Nevada State Athletic Commission. Sentence can be reduced 6 months with fight eligibility of October 2024. Azmat Morzanov, second violation under the UFC, won't be eligible until May 2021. So the Ultimate Fighter this year, we had just a whole bunch of unknowns, okay? This year, we had the title fights. Some of the title fights that we had going on this year. Women's bantamweight, Raquel Pennington versus Buena Silva. That was a good fight. Really good fight. Oh, for a women's fight, it was a good fight. Dricus du Plessis against Sean Strickland. That was a good fight. Split decision. Could have gone either way. Not mad at it, which is the reason why they have a rematch. Now we got Khamzat waiting in the wings. Ilya Topora against Alexander Volkov. Standard. Sean O'Malley finally gets his revenge against Marlon Vera as one of the title fights of 2024. Zhang Weili taking on Zhang Yanan. First time that Yan and Zhang, both Chinese, representing in a championship fight for the women's division. Alex Pereira defeats Jamal Hill. That was an interesting fight, obviously, for UFC 300, replacing Conor McGregor. Alexander Pantoja, Steve Erceg. A very undeveloped 125 division, right? Erceg probably had one fight, a couple of fights in the UFC, and they're like, hey, good enough. Send him in there. Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier, a very good fight. Dustin Poirier made a great account of himself. By the end of the day, Islam is the status quo of the 155 division and may prove that once again next month, July 18th, in the Los Angeles card for 2025. Alex Pereira, again, back at it. Second round, 13-second KO, head kick and punches. Tom Aspinall finally gets his revenge against Curtis Blades after being finished in 15 seconds due to a knee injury, or I believe a shin injury of some sort. One of those, a leg injury. Let's just simplify it as that. And then Bilal Muhammad and Leon Edwards, as I've mentioned earlier. Now, obviously, for a long time, Bilal Muhammad has been knocking at the door for a title shot. And once again, he sort of got a revenge against Leon Edwards. Now, it was a no contest in the first fight. But in the first fight, man, let's be real, Leon Edwards is winning that fight. But none of that mattered when Bilal Muhammad went in there. And now Bilal Muhammad was supposed to fight Shavkat Rakhmonov last month, but all of that fell through. We'll see what happens next. I think Shavkat and Bilal are going to be next, if not somebody else that is going to rise in the 170 division. And it could have been Ian Gary, because obviously Ian Gary just fought Shavkat recently. Ian Gary made a great account of himself. Not only did he make a great account of himself, he rose up his stock through a loss. And this is one of those situations that happened. Valentina Shevchenko finally gets a decision win against Alex Grasso as another revenge tour. Merab taking on Sean gets a decision at UFC's Noche, a very big card, by the way, a card that I had just mentioned earlier in the live stream. A lot of expenses being paid by the Saudis, while on that same day, Canelo was fighting Berlanga. Juliana Pena against Raquel Pennington, finally defeating Raquel Pennington, getting her title back. And then Alex Pereira again taking on Khalil Roundtree, fourth round knockout. Ilya Topora knocks out Max Holloway. Not many people can do that. Again, putting new levels into the game of Ilya Topora. And then here comes John Jones following up last month against Stipe Miocic. Spinning back kick. We all wondered what type of shape John Jones is in. We all wanted the Tom Aspinall fight. We now understand that there's a lot of negotiation ploy that John Jones was trying to make. And now that fight between him and Aspinall, I believe, is going to be projected for International Fight Week in July of 2025. Because you got to remember, right? There's always an International Fight Week every year. They got to fill it up. There's always a New York card every year. They got to fill it up. This year, it was John Jones and Stipe. It was supposed to be John Jones and Stipe in the previous New York card in the previous year, but it was replaced by Tom Aspinall against Sergey Pavlovich, and here we are as a result of it. So like I said, the final championship fight for 2024, Alex Pantoja taking on Kai Asakara. Now, obviously, the last MMA that goes on every year in the world is Ryzen. So what do? They bring in a Ryzen champion. And by the way, there's a little bit of some collaboration going on with Ryzen and the UFC here. If you notice, Sean O'Malley was in attendance in Ryzen. And in the Kai Asakara fight with Alexander Pantoja, the owner and the CEO and the president of Ryzen was present there, which is really interesting. And that kind of shows you where the 125 division was at, or where Alex Pantoja is at in his career. He was beating everybody, sort of cleaned everybody out, where they had to bring in new people from different organizations in order to create new competition, create new blood for him. So that is what we had for the whole entire year when it came to championship fights. Now, obviously, there were a lot of great fight nights. This is also the year where many of the past events, when it came to, let's say, the Apex, we're sort of moving away from that, right? Look at the last UFC fight that we had this year. It was Covington versus Buckley. That was in Tampa. And then the other fight night was in China. They had a fight night in China. Yan versus Figueroa. The Apex, obviously, the Apex will always be there. They had a fight night in Rogers Place in Edmonton, Alberta. The 308 was not a fight night. That was a pay-per-view. Another fight night in the Apex, another fight night in the Apex, and then they had a pay-per-view in UFC 307 against Pereira and Roundtree. UFC Fight Night against Moicano, that was in Paris. So a little different now. Every year they started escalating it. You remember during the pandemic, they had to have the Apex. All of the fights were in the Apex. And then Abu Dhabi was the second home after that, with all the quarantine having a bubble that they built. Sort of a blueprint for other professional sports. But then as a couple of years went by, they had to start developing different markets out there. So obviously Paris, China, what else? Perth, that was a UFC pay-per-view. Sanhagen versus Nurmagomedov, that was a fight night, but that was in Abu Dhabi. And then I mentioned earlier about the Edwards and the Muhammad fight. That was also a fight where, that was where Tom Aspinall had avenged his loss against Curtis Blades. By the way, that was a great fight night. I predicted every single fight of that night down to the T. I urge you guys to check out my UFC 304 coverage. Really good stuff. Lemos versus Jen Dirboa, that was in the Apex, obviously, still in the Apex. They had a fight night in Colorado. And then, how about this? Saudi Arabia, first Saudi Arabian fight night card. It was supposed to be Khamzat, but obviously Khamzat had fell through. In comes Ali Askarov, a guy who Khamzat had experience fighting before. He knocked him out. And so did Whitaker. Whitaker knocked him out as well. Louis v. Kentucky was also another fight night setting. UFC New York, New Jersey. Yeah, that was Dustin Poirier and Makachev. So they also had one in St. Louis. And then a pay-per-view in Rio de Janeiro. So the Atlantic City card was also a fight night. Mexico City, that was also a fight night. Toronto, very early in the year. Once again, back full circle again, here they are. And how about this? They opened this year with Ankalaev and Walker. But where is Ankalaev in all of this? That is a question that I would like to ask, right? That's the question that I would like to ask. And by the way, for those of you that are tapping in right now, New Year's has now concluded, right? It is now New Year's here in the West Coast, 12 a.m. in the morning. After going over all of the UFC, going over all of the fights that have happened, all the different developments that they made with different cities of the fight nights that they've been putting on. I got to say, I'm really looking forward to 2025 because I feel like there's going to be even bigger matchups escalating on a constant level. Because here's the thing, right? We always notice every year the UFC keeps getting better and better and better. And we got to ask, why is that? Well, it's because the competition is getting better, the level of skills are getting better. And not only are all of those things getting better, the events, the partnerships that they're building around the world, whether it's with TKO or the Saudis, or maybe even India next, with obviously Conor McGregor possibly fighting Logan Paul. And then you got John Jones versus Tom Aspinall, possibly the biggest heavyweight matchup in all of UFC's history, without Francis Ngannou in the mix. And who knows, maybe we'll get Francis Ngannou in the middle of that. Or we'll also get Alex Pereira finally fighting Ankalaev, considering Ankalaev did start off the 2024 as a headline for Fight Night against Walker. But either way, this is a great year of fights, great year of MMA, great year of boxing, which is something that I also cover. I can't wait for 2025 and what comes next. So this is a great year. I wish everybody a great night, and I will see you in the next one, inshallah. For everybody in the chat and everybody staying, please stay. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because I will see you in the next one, inshallah. You guys are still here? It's already 2025. It's no longer 2024.